The guest, continuing to speak in a mild manner, replied, "One could hardly say that Honen is the only one who disparages sutras and speaks ill of the other priests, since you do the same thing yourself. However, it is true that he takes the 637 Mahayana scriptures in 2,883 volumes, along with all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and the deities of this world, and urges people to discard, close, ignore, and abandon them. There is no doubt that these 4 injunctions are his very words. The meaning of the passage is quite clear. But you keep harping on this one little flaw in the jewel and severely slandering him for it. I do not know whether he spoke out of delusion or out of enlightenment. Between you and Honen, I cannot tell which is wise and which is foolish, or determine whose assertions are right and whose are wrong. However, you assert that all the recent disasters are to be traced to Nambusu chosen above all, speaking quite volubly on that point and elaborating on the meaning of your assertion. Now, surely the peace of the world and the stability of the nation are sought by both ruler and subject, and desired by all the inhabitants of the country. The nation achieves prosperity through the Buddhist law, and the law is proven worthy of reverence by the people who embrace it. If the nation is destroyed and the people are wiped out, then who will continue to pay reverence to the Buddhas? Who will continue to have faith in the law? Therefore, one must first of all pray for the safety of the nation and then work to establish the Buddhist law. Now, if you know of any means whereby disasters can be prevented and troubles brought to an end, I would like to hear about it." The host said, "There is no doubt that I am the foolish one. I would never dare claim to be wise. However, I would just like to quote some passages from the scriptures and offer some brief thoughts. Concerning the means for ensuring order in the nation, there are numerous passages in both Buddhist and non-Buddhist texts, and it will be difficult to cite them all here. Since taking up the study of Buddhism, however, I have frequently given thought to this matter, and it seems to me that restraining those who slander the law and respecting the followers of the correct way will assure stability within the nation and peace in the world at large." In the Nirvana Sutra, we read, "The Buddha said, with the exception of one type of person, you may offer alms to all kinds of persons, and everyone will praise you." Chunda said, "What do you mean when you speak of one type of person?" The Buddha replied, "I mean the type described in this sutra as violators of the precepts." Chunda spoke again, saying, "I am afraid I still do not understand. May I ask you to explain further?" The Buddha addressed Chunda, saying, "By violators of the precepts, I mean the inchantika. In the case of all other types of persons, you may offer alms. Everyone will praise you, and you will achieve great rewards." Chunda spoke once more, asking, "What is the meaning of the term inchantika?" The Buddha said, "Chunda, suppose they should be monks or nuns, lay men or women, who speak careless and evil words and slander the correct teaching, and that they should go on committing these grave acts without ever showing any inclination to reform or any sign of repentance in their hearts. Persons of this kind, I would say, are the following the path of the inchantika. Again, there may be those who commit the 4 grave offenses, or are guilty of the 5 cardinal sins, and who, though aware that they are guilty of serious faults, from the beginning have no trace of fear or contrition in their hearts, or if they do, give no outward sign of it. When it comes to the correct teaching, They show no inclination to protect, treasure, and establish it over the ages, but rather speak of it with malice and contempt, their words replete with error. People of this kind too, I would say, are following the path of the Inchantika. With the exception of this one group of people called Inchantika, however, you may offer alms to all others, and everyone will praise you. Elsewhere in the same sutra, the Buddha spoke in these words. When I recall the past, I remember that I was the king of a great state in this continent of Jambudvipa. My name was Senyo, and I loved and venerated the great vehicle scriptures. My heart was pure and good and had no trace of evil, jealousy, or stinginess. Good men, at that time I cherished the great vehicle teachings in my heart. When I heard the Brahmans slandering these correct and equal sutras, I put them to death on the spot. Good men, as a result of that action, I never thereafter fell into hell. In another passage it says, in the past, when the Tuscan one was the ruler of a nation and practiced the way of Bodhisattva, he put to death a number of Brahmans. Again it says, there are 3 degrees of killings, the lower, middle, and upper degrees. The lower constitutes the killing of any humble being, from an ant to any of the various kinds of animals. But the killing of any being that a bodhisattva has chosen to be born as to help other living beings is excluded. As a result of a killing of the lower degree, one will fall into the realm of hell, hungry spirits and animals, and will suffer all the pains appropriate to a killing of the lower degree. Why should this be? Because even animals and other humble beings possess the roots of goodness, insignificant though those roots may be. That is why a person who kills such a being must suffer full retribution for his offense. Killing any person from an ordinary mortal to an energumen constitutes what is termed the middle degree. As a consequence of such an act of killing, one will fall into the realms of hell, hungry spirits and animals, and will suffer all the pains appropriate to a killing of the middle degree. The upper degree of killing refers to the killing of a parent, an arhat, a pranyaka Buddha, or a bodhisattva who has reached the stage of non-retrogression. For such a crime, one will fall into the great Avicii hell. Good men, if someone were to kill an Inchantika, that killing would not fall into any of the 3 categories just mentioned. Good men, the various Brahmans that I have said, were put to death. All of them were in fact Inchantikas. In the Benevolent King Sutras, we read, quote, the Buddha announced to King Prasenajit, thus I had entrusted the protection of my teaching to the ruler of the nation, rather than to the monks and nuns. Why do I say so? Because they do not possess the kind of power and authority that the king has, unquote. The Nirvana Sutra states, quote, now I entrust the correct teaching, which is unexcelled, to the rulers, the ministers, the high officials, and the 4 kinds of Buddhists. If anyone should vilify the correct teaching, then the ministers and 4 kinds of Buddhists should reprimand him and bring him to order, unquote. It also states, quote, the Buddha replied, Bodhisattva Kashyapa, it is because I was a defender of the correct teaching that I have been able to attain this diamond-like body. Good men, defenders of the correct teaching need not observe the 5 precepts or practice the rules of proper behavior. Rather, they should carry knives and swords, bows and arrows, halberds and lances, unquote. Again, the Buddha said, quote, even though there may be those who observe the 5 precepts, they do not deserve to be called practitioners of the great vehicle. But even if one does not observe the 5 precepts, if one defends the correct teaching, then one may be called a practitioner of the great vehicle. Defenders of the correct teaching ought to arm themselves with knives and swords, weapons and staves. Even though they carry swords and staves, I will call them men who observe the precepts." Unquote.